Welcome back, guys. We're going into the final hour of Roleplay Mirrorshades. Kind of. The show's pretty much done, but we're going to talk a little bit about Shadowrun and also answer some more questions that I think Adam has already pulled. So, Adam?
So big thing that we changed about the game and changed from the get-go was the way that the game rewarded you karma for doing stuff. So normally the amounts of karma were about the same that you got. So the progression of the characters was pretty on par for Shadowrun. But normally the reward structure in Shadowrun is quite dull. It's like you get 1 point just for showing up. You get 1 point if you like do a mission. You get 1 point if you like do something heroic. Like it's all kind of like generic. Like everyone gets awarded the same.
Right.
So we replaced that with the very sort of personal belief, instinct, goal thing that we were doing in every episode, and then also the vote. So for those of you with experience with reward structures in other role-playing games like Wheat and Kaitlyn and actually I guess for everybody that's played a game where you get stuff for playing it, how did you feel about that as a reward structure? Did it help you play your character? Were there times where you were looking at your belief, instinct, and goal and saying like, I want to get some karma, I'm going to do these things? Or was it something that, like, how did you all feel about that? Because I'm curious personally about this as well.
I mean,
I thought the karma system was great.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, my character didn't use it as XP because I was pretty much like done in terms of the character creation.
Sure. Yeah.
But the
Your character was the most like maximally optimized for one specific
right.
thing.
But then the karma basically became my lifeline. Like if I went
Yes.
into a fight without karma, there was a very high. In fact, there was multiple times where I went into a fight with very little karma, and there was multiple times I almost died.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it was like either Hadia saved me or Breakdown was there to save me or heal me at the end. And so without karma, like I probably would have died. So I kind of like didn't treat it as other tabletop RPGs where you advance your character. Mine was just kind of like, oh, I have a get out of jail free card, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think I felt like it worked specifically very well. Also having you as a DM because like there's a whole lot of focus on us like legitimately role playing, right? Like being our characters, getting into the mindset of our characters. And I think it took a while for us to realize like the best way to optimize beliefs, instincts, and goals, right? Like coming up with a goal that I could possibly actually do in this 4-hour period, right? Like figuring out how to create those in a good way. But I think that it kept all of us thinking along the right lines, which is like, it's about the story, it's about the characters, like the combat is going to wind up being kind of goofy. So it's not as much about that. Like what you want to be thinking about is who you are and your role in the story. And I thought that it did really well for that, like creating focus points for us, you know?
Yeah, I really liked it for two reasons. So the first being kind of like what Saja said, where it really helps you build your character and find focus points for it. And I'm someone who really doesn't like when things are repeated, but when you watch something and you don't know someone's character, it's really hard to understand what it is without them having like a catchphrase, repeating something. And I actually love it when people have catchphrases. I think it's like hilarious. I'm like, ah ha ha, he said the thing, yeah, crush her, girls are dying. But I have a hard time doing that for myself. But like it really helps you find your niche for the character, and it also lets you explore your characters in other ways. So at least for me, I liked having this like outwards goal that wasn't the character's real goal, but sometimes I could have the real goal be my goal. And then second, I really like how it rewards, you know, your weaknesses, because that's really important for me when I play a character, like really important. And especially when you're doing it where you're in like a public venue where people can criticize you, it really helps, because now like when you played your character's weakness, you can be like, no, fuck you, I got all this karma for it. So there's a reason.
I think that was sort of what encouraged me to use it in the first place, was that I wanted a game that was about the characters being Shadowrunners and not a game about some generic placeholder Shadowrunner archetypes. And I think it worked, I don't want to say too well, but there was definitely a point at which I was like, oh, we're like doing this whole other thing that looks like Shadowrun, and kind of talks like Shadowrun.
Yeah.
But like it's really this whole other game that we're playing, and it was at that point where like things like combat and the more like intensive mechanical stuff seemed to kind of like feel less interesting and felt a little de-emphasized because it was kind of like, okay, well, we could spend 2 hours like doing a tense fight, and sometimes that was really fun, but often it was like, well, let's focus on the other stuff. Let's look at the things that are often kind of overlooked in Shadowrun. I mean, obviously, like you have some experience with Shadowrun of a more traditional mold. How did you feel about the like difference between Mirrorshades and your previous Shadowrun experience?
I think I realized by episode 4 or maybe even sooner that we actually would have a really, really, really difficult time like beating a like full-blown Shadowrun mission that wasn't pretty much crafted for these group of 4 people. And that was the best thing that could have happened, because I think that did allow us to play the game you just described that was Shadowrun but wasn't Shadowrun, and that was enough for me. Like, right, it wasn't the system I fell in love with. It was the world. And that's what this proved to me. Like, I loved playing Shadowrun in high school because it was the world of Shadowrun, and not necessarily because it was this, oh my God, system that like is so great. So to the point, to bring that back to the karma point too, I love the fact that like I pretty much ran with I am a hacker and I must hack the whole time, because had I not had that goal, then I don't know that I would have had as fun playing that character. But for me, it was fine. It was great. I mean, occasionally I would get mad and angry at the people that were like, God, you guys are really fucking bad at this game. And I'm like, yeah, but that's okay. Like, cause that's the point. It's the struggle. Yeah. And you know what? I never did that in Shadowrun. We never had a struggle run ever. It was, in fact, we were probably like way, way, way over prepared in a lot of cases. That's what made this a lot of fun. So, the fact that I got a boyfriend out of it, that's good. I mean,
I think that was really just Dodger's entire goal of this entire thing was to sabotage it and make it a dating sim. So.
No, that's not
true. so I think this is the thing. Like every time you play a role-playing game, it's a kind of alchemy between the game itself, the people playing it, and the GM, and everybody has kind of a creative agenda that they're moving the game towards. And while I think it's easy to say, like this, like cyberpunk dating sim, that seems like a thing that Dodger would be into, it's probably her pulling everybody in that direction. If you watch
on purpose, I swear.
100% on purpose.
I think it's easy. I think it's
we actually have logs of after the first game, like, hey, we should turn this into what Dodger wants. Okay, yeah, sure.
I think it's easy to do that, but it's also, if you watch Swansong, like the way that I tend to GM games, it's about the characters' interactions with each other. That's like really interesting. There's an overarching premise, but we don't tune in to watch like how quickly will they destroy this corporation? How many times can they ace these shooting rolls? What is really interesting is like the aftermath of the intense violence, the cost to those people, the way that the characters in a traumatic situation get connected to each other. And I actually had a question for y'all. So there were several times in this game, like we've had this conversation before, various things talking about media in general. It's easy to do violence, right? It's easy to be like, yeah, cool, your character has to shoot somebody. Whatever, I shoot him. Now he's dead. Whatever. But it's a lot harder, especially in a role-playing context, with a person you're not actually like romantically involved with, to play a character who is. So, like the first arc with Hadia and Crusher, or like everything with Bond Down, or Gavin later on, like me trying to be like, but I love you, Knight's Ass. Why won't you love me? I'm such a human. That stuff for me was my favorite part of the game. But how did y'all feel about the kind of relationship focus of the game, and like in those moments, like at the end of the date, like those moments of kind of like emotional intensity? How did that feel from a roleplay perspective? Because I don't think a lot of D&D games go there.
Yeah, I think that was kind of what this show kind of like flexed in terms of its roleplay muscle, and that was something that has not really existed in anything that I've played. It's always been kind of like, oh, let's kill the big monster and get the fat loot. Like that was kind of always the driving force. And so it was interesting to like, I think whenever that episode happened with Hadia, that was like, I was kind of like, oh, you can actually, that could be a thing that you do in a game. Like that's pretty cool. And then I just kind of like rode with that for the rest of the 25 weeks or however long we played with that. But yeah, that's my answer.
I like how everyone was so willing, and so it was never weird or awkward or anything like that. Everyone
totally.
just fed off each other so well. So
Yeah.
it was so well role played, and everyone was like receptive and.
Yeah, and I feel like it really did add to those scenes when other characters were in trouble, right? For us as players and for the viewers,
Yeah.
I'm sure, because it's like there's more at stake than just, oh, this is a character and I can just re-roll. It was like, no, Crusher can't die because he's got a kid, and he's like,
Right, it gave
and he's
like a
got
reason.
Hadia, and like,
Yeah.
it added this whole other layer of like this person has a life and people that they care about, and
Well, I think
and,
even someone like Maurice was interesting for
Yeah.
not only us as players, but it's for the audience, because then it had like between Dodger and Wheat, you guys had like a character that was kind of trying to sabotage that whole relationship. And so like the audience is like, oh yeah, let's get Maurice in there and he'll fuck everything up and it'll be great.
Yeah, the thing about like a lot of these characters, like I make NPCs to highlight stuff about the player characters. Like no NPC exists in a vacuum because the show is about Breakdown and Bonbon and Crusher and Night's Ass. It's not the Young Taiga show, right? Like those characters are interesting, but for me, they're only interesting because I can use them to prompt certain actions from you or to like offer you a challenge, right? Where I'm like, yeah, okay, so there's this burgeoning romance that's sort of starting between Breakdown and Bonbon. What if I put in an NPC who's like, no, forget this chump elf. You should hang out with me. And like, how will the two characters react to that character?
It was awesome.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we're playing a game that did next to nothing to support that. Like, imagine a game where there were mechanics that actually were like helping that thing. Because we would end up in these situations where, like, well, I know you could say pretty certainly, I know how easy it would be to murder this NPC, but it's much harder to say, I know how hard it would be for this character to convince this character to fall in love with me. Like those things. So we ended up in this space where we're a little bit set aside from the game itself, and that can feel you can feel a little exposed in those sequences where it's like, no, the game's not going to help you. Don't look at your character sheet. Just look at the other player and like talk about what's going on with your characters. And that can be tricky. So I'm actually really happy with the way all of that stuff worked out. Like Kaitlyn said, it could very easily have been with a different group of players, like kind of like uncomfortable or awkward, and it's fun to explore those things. That's sort of why I like role playing games.
It never felt weird to me.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It always just felt
fun.
fun, and like I think also because I don't know about other Shadowrun games, but it felt like everybody chose kind of like specific bombastic sitcom-esque characters, that were kind of slammed into a cyberpunk world. So that also kind of helped in that interacting was so much fun, and everybody like really obviously loved being their characters and interacting with each other. So
yeah, and it for me, I thought it was interesting because every episode there'd be somebody who would say on the Reddit thread or in chat, or would be like, well, why don't you ever try to kill them? No one's died in the show. Why is it not like... I'm like, because there are other ways to make this interesting. And I wanted to ask you about this. So because of everybody here, the person I found it easiest to like get into that scared, awkward place was you, Dodger. I found out how to twist the knife on Breakdown pretty early.
I know.
So there were a couple of questions about that in the Reddit thread, like how did you feel about that? There's lots of like screen grabs of you looking terrified playing this game, and I think it started earlier on, but I think the moment for me where I realized like, oh, okay, like I get how I could put some tension on for Dodger was that scene where you're being interrogated by the lawyer in the Aztec pyramid, right? Where I'm like, oh, like you're by yourself. And success or failure is contingent on you. Like you can't. No one will save you. This is your turn now, Dodger.
I think because like that's an aspect that I absolutely share with Breakdown. Like this feeling of I don't want to let the group down, or I don't want to let this person down. Like in any specific situation. So having me who feels that way and Breakdown who definitely has that as an aspect of his character, like both of us together trying to navigate through those situations that you would concoct where it was me on my own having to like figure out what to do. That was absolutely how to get me to be like, fuck.
So Breakdown is a super neurotic Dodger.
Yeah.
Well, and I think everybody plays a bit of themselves in every character that they're playing.
Of
And
course.
as a GM, when you can find those bits, because I don't like I know at this point, I feel like with like Dodger and Kaitlyn especially because this is the most time we spend together. I feel like I know Breakdown about as well as I know Dodger,
Yeah.
right? Like the two are very similar for me. So finding where I'm interacting, like realizing at some point where I'm like, oh, this conversation Breakdown is very thin. I'm actually like putting this pressure on Dodger. That was a thing that I found you kind of as a GM you kind of have to be gentle about because you can push too hard and it can be like uncomfortable. But I feel like we got a pretty good rhythm there, and I wanted to test that again at the end with the whole thing with Raven, where I was like, okay, I got one more big one. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that felt like something that was interesting and fun for you because I know it
When
was
you-
certainly fun for me in the audience. So.
Right.
When did you try and push me, Adam? Because, like you said, you couldn't get through to me, and I don't even
It wasn't even
know.
getting through to you. It was like trying to challenge you or trying to give you stuff that I would be like, oh, like, maybe this will be a challenge. And then just having you do something that I had no response to. Like there was an interaction with one of the gangsters that like I feel like I'm pretty decent as a GM. I'm pretty practiced at this. I have some okay improvisational skills.
You're all
But
right,
there were lots of times where I'm like, all right, here's the thing. He's all like up in your face. And you're like, I don't know, I give him a smooch. And I'm like, I don't. How do I respond to this? And I mean, that was the thing for me was it was fun. It stopped being about trying to get you, like, to challenge you, and more to be like, I'm just gonna put this here, and whatever you do with it will be amazing. So, here's an NPC. Go to town.
That's watering a garden. Like, most non-threatening thing ever.
Yeah, like exactly. I was like, I can just place this character in your way, and something will go totally wrong and amazing. The other thing that I wanted to ask too, and this goes way back to the beginning, was JP. What was your reasoning or inspiration behind playing a character who couldn't talk? Like, what was that about? Why did you do that early on? And what made you decide to change your character partway through?
At that point, roleplay was about 5 shows a week or 4 shows a week, and I just didn't want to talk.
So what? Yeah,
That's
and
100% the reason.
totally. And that's real. Like we make character decisions based on like personal stuff, like actual human stuff.
Yeah.
So what made you change your mind partway through?
The shows started to be less frequent on a month or a week-to-week basis, and I felt like I was having less of an impact in the game. And I was kind of just like, oh, it's time to go fight again. Like, I'm going to go fight. And that was kind of like the entire character. And I was very like limited in my actions. And so that's why I ended up talking. I felt like I think you teased it, or maybe you said it in like a Q&A that I could go get the surgery or something like that.
Well, yeah, because you had established right away that your character had like traumatic cybernetic surgery as a result of your goblinization being so like damaging to you, and we had said that there was some like neurological damage or that it was
Yeah.
exacerbated by the surgery, but you couldn't afford to like fix that part. You just got your cyber arms and got tough and had a job, and we made that kind of one-dimensionalness part of the character. And then I think that there was like a throwaway comment about like, well, if you worked at it or you wanted to change it, that would be a thing.
Oh.
Yeah. I think also too, at that particular episode, I was pretty upset at the plans the group was making.
You're like, I'm ready to have a say.
I think that was like, I even said that like in character that I think that might have been where like me and Bonbon had our first like fight in the, in her apartment, because like the plans were just abysmal and my character's eyes and my eyes as well. And then like when I started doing the plans, they weren't any better. So it still worked out.
Yeah.
Remember
but
when
it-
you bled on a guy?
Yeah. And
I remember that.
that was like the most, like the biggest impact I could have was just doing these like really fucking weird things. Cause like I felt like as a character and as me, I didn't know how to like do anything. Like silence is something that's really hard to do unless everyone's 100% in character the entire time.
Yeah.
Really?
I couldn't imagine doing that, dude.
I really don't understand why Hidea ended up with Crusher when Crusher was such a psychopath. Like, did Crusher hide parts of himself from her?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that the setup for the world is that it is this kind of like fucked up dystopia, and you kind of take what you can get, and then there was some degree of like tenderness there that she was attracted to that blossomed into something bigger. I think part of that was me trying to challenge JP's playing of Crusher to be like, cool, man, I see you blowing through all these obstacles, And I could, and a lot of the time early on when people were seeing like, oh cool, so you just absorb like a full burst fire from an AK and nothing happens to you. Why don't people were like, why don't you just like throw magic at him? He'll totally just die. I'm like, I could, but that's boring. How about I try to give you a challenge you can't kill your way out of? And I wanted to see how you'd react to that. So there was some like GM decision there.
I also think in terms of the not talking, I think at the very beginning, probably like 30 minutes prior to the first episode, I had always intended on doing like a Brooklyn accent, but I was like, I didn't know how to do one. And so like, I was like, I mean, I could do like a really bad one and just like force it and be terrible. Or I could just be silent. I was like, hey, I'll just be silent. Like I talk too fucking much anyways. And then like I would actually, when I would go to get food after like a broadcast or something for 30 minutes in the car where it's just me, I would like fucking work on a stupid accent. And like I got to an okay point where I was like, okay. Well, if I want to do that, I can do that.
Hey, Jiffy, can you say I'm walking here?
See, I even when you put me on spot, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Accents are really hard, and they do take
They're really
practice.
hard, yeah. I worked
Like,
forever on Duncan from Dungeon World, the Irish accent, and then I just stopped. I was like, nope, that's terrible. I'm not going to do that ever again.
The day that we did the West Marches panel at PAX, I spent like an hour just talking to myself in my head in my bad Russian accent to be like, okay, this is what that sounds like.
That's bad because you sound good in your head. You literally have to speak outside, like out loud.
Oh yeah, totally.
You have to look crazy in order to like, get the accent right. Because otherwise you're going to sound perfect in your head, and then you're going to talk and you're going to sound like completely different. At least that's what I found. So maybe that's just my...
It does definitely help to talk out loud to yourself, for sure.
Yeah.
And then when you hear the recording, you sound even worse.
I don't... The recording doesn't bother me anymore.
I would always start talking to Jen and James about 10 minutes before the show as Bon Bon when we first started, because it was like, especially because I was doing Piani too, and there was a couple times.
Even in the first episode, people were. I still get the pluses on the YouTube comment on the first episode where somebody is like, "I'm just waiting for him to mix up the Piani accent." I'm like, I'm waiting for that too. I can't.
Yeah,
wait.
I think I managed to not do it.
I do think though that the whatever Crusher's accent is I think my favorite one to do, even more than Higgs now, because Higgs is like, I've always been able to talk like that. Like it's really easy for me to just talk like I'm from the South very easily. Yeah. And I have never done a Brooklyn accent before, so that was fun. That was a fun thing to learn.
Folks asked me a lot about the Mom Bon voice, and they're like, "Oh, where did you like get that from? Like, what how did you do that accent?" And I'm like, I'm making fun of Wheat. Doing his accent, like I'm listening to you talk and I'm just saying things the way you say them, but just more nasally and louder. Like I didn't that accent came to me almost by accident because you were just like talking about it. I'm like, oh, of course he sounds like you, but old and
right.
And that's what I loved so much about the like Bon Bon pulling a Mom Bon move near the end. And guilt, like countering the guilt trip thing, because it's like, we've come full circle. Now you're the Mom Bon.
I love it.
Yeah, it was really good. So, I mean, I think this is a question that came up a bunch of times, and I'm kind of curious about it too. It's the generic question that always comes up in QAs. If you think back about the show and kind of all the stuff that we did, is there any particular moment or moments that like really stand out as a thing that like you really enjoyed? Or that was kind of a standout thing for you about like this series. It wouldn't even necessarily have to be like a thing your character did or whatever, but just like moments in the show that you feel like you'll remember as part of your Mirrorshades experience.
Mine will always be Dodger and Wheat singing. Always.
Yeah, I was gonna say the karaoke, the impromptu karaoke is one of mine too. I was just blown away.
I've still never heard that because I took my headphones off, so I don't know what that was.
Oh, it's great. Actually,
I mean, you should go back and.
No, I'm good.
That.
I'm great. I'm fantastic.
Great.
Tokyo Arc for me was one of my favorite. Like just the fact that everyone embraced the fact that was happening. And just was like, yeah, we're going to fuck Tokyo. Let's just like, and I think everyone was kind of familiar with Tokyo in some aspects, so they kind of could understand what would be unique about that compared to just the normal Seattle that we were in. And I thought that was a lot of fun. And also the fact that someone made a song with me saying we're going to Tokyo, so that's cool.
I mean, the whole yeah, the whole like creation of country music and
That's
that
true.
whole thing, like that was pretty early on in Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
Like when we
Yeah.
were first trying to get into Kenji's apartment
Yeah.
building.
Hot Kathy was fucking hilarious now that I think
Hot
about it.
Kathy, holy
Hot
shit.
I forgot about
yeah.
Hot
That
Kathy.
was amazing.
Otto Kathy.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that was so good.
I still will never forget. It's referenced even on Swan Song, but the hamburger mission. I mean
Yeah, we were talking about that the
the
other day.
plan,
Filling,
yeah.
filling a car full of hamburgers.
hamburgers and,
And driving
like
it through the
raising
window.
it 73
Because,
stories.
because the reasoning for that was to make him hate America. You're like, what's the most American shit I could think of? Oh, let's fill a Cadillac
Whose
with hamburgers.
idea was that?
It was a collaboration.
it was a collaborative effort.
It just
yeah.
started coming out. I too like the Tokyo arc. I have to say that was a lot of fun.
It was just a fun thing to like. It was. I never envisioned our characters going to Tokyo when we started playing. I
No.
don't think.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the thing is, I think we have these sort of three distinct sections to the game, right? And this happened like a little bit on purpose. There's a little bit of nudging by everybody to guide it this way, but I think a lot of it was just emergent property of the game where like we had the pilot episode. And then we had the figuring out what this game is actually about thing with Hidia and like protecting her and realizing that it's like a really like relationship driven game. Then we had the Tokyo arc, and what's fascinating about that arc is that it's the biggest failure the team had, hands down. Like this
Right.
was when we just embraced the fact that
Hands
succeeding-
down. Wink,
Yeah.
wink,
Ha!
wink.
Ah,
Can-
Like hands off, am I right?
Can I
Ah.
say one thing about our failure though? Adam said, he's gonna roll a 1d6, and on a 4 to 6 we succeed, and on a 1 to 3 we fail. And then right before he rolled it, he flipped it. And I want to say our massive failure was like a 50-50
Oh.
chance. We came so close to doing it, and Adam flipped it at the last second. So like this massive failure, we almost did it. Almost. We were so
Almost.
close.
We were pretty close.
But I think what's interesting about that bit and about the fact that the most kind of impactful part of the show was a colossal failure was us all as a group saying like we reject the idea that we need to be successful Shadowrunners for this to be fun. That it was
Yeah.
like the characters just screwing things up and having to deal with the ramifications. That's what this is about. And then this last arc was very much about that, about this like, okay, we're gonna give it one last try and like try to keep our shit together. Because the whole sub narrative through that was like, should we or should we not be Shadowrunners, right? Like that's why I introduced Gavin, who like used to be a Shadowrunner and had like
Right.
gone straight, and it was like, should we quit this job? Should we not? Like some of us can't quit, and that kind of was the theme of that last arc was, you know, we've embraced as players embraced the sort of failure is fun part. Let's see if the characters want to keep trying to be Shadowrunners or not, right?
Yeah.
And I think that
I think-
was it's a really cool arc, that whole set.
I think and I'm interested to hear the rest of the cast, but Adam knows the game very well because he has to, right? Because if he doesn't know the game, then we don't know what the fuck we're doing. But 31 weeks in the Shadowrun world, I could not tell you how to play Shadowrun. To this day, I have no fucking idea how the majority of things. I have no idea how spells work in this game. Dodger would just make a roll and be like, "Well, did they do it? Did you succeed?"
I have so many of you who are watching right now know that I am planning on someday eventually trying to DM a thing one day someday.
Right.
And a bunch of my friends were like, "Oh, you're playing Shadowrun? Dude, you should just try out DMing on us and you can DM Shadowrun." And I was like, "Jesus Christ."
Yeah.
Like,
And
that would be a colossal
I think it's
failure.
also not a fault of like Adam not teaching it. Like Adam taught us the game
No,
plenty
not
of
at
times.
all.
It was the fact that we had like breaks and like it's just a fucking complicated system. And I think also
is.
in
It's
general,
funny 'cause-
I just learned so much in general, like how I should do role play. Like if the audience doesn't understand how important this role is, like a lot of times I would ask you like, okay, what do I need here to like make this super successful? And that was kind of something that I did towards the later parts of the show. Because a lot of times we'd just be like, yeah, I'm gonna roll 10d8 and we'll see what we get. And then I'd roll and be like, Adam, can you interpret like rolling the bones? And you were fucking like
Yeah.
deciphering what it means. A lot of
Well, it was
times.
interesting too because the system is so complex that it almost helped having to explain everything that was happening every single time it was happening, because it's so easy to get behind to be like, okay, wait, how many successes do I need for this? And
Yeah.
what does this do? Because then we got pretty good at shorthanding it to be like, okay, you need this many successes. If you get this, this happens. And yeah, it is a really complex system, but it's also the fact that we didn't like. If I had been really aggressive Shadowrun GM guy, I would have punished you for not learning the rules. I would have been
Right,
like, "Oh,
right,
guess what?
right.
You don't know how armor works.
But
You're dead."
that's no fun for
Yeah, and
both
that's-
us
that's-
and for the viewers. And I think you recognize that right off the bat.
Yeah, and it would be fun if that was the idea. If I were, it's like the Dark Souls thing, right? You learn how to play, or you rage quit and stop playing, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't want to play that game, and we had very quickly kind of moved away from that. But it is. I'm curious too. Like for the rest of the players, like how did you feel about engaging with the rule set the way you did, and did you feel like you wanted to know it better but like couldn't figure it out, or like how was all that for y'all?
I was fine with the I think the way that the rules were implemented. I mean, I think for people to look at this as an example for exactly how a Shadowrun game goes, like, as we mentioned several times, like hacking can go entire sessions by itself, just sort of with the complexity within. So, I mean, I think the considerations that were made to it overall were good for us to focus on what it sounds like we all were okay with, which is the story.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, that's it.
I always forgot. Even me, JP, I always forgot how magic worked. Every single time I had to roll magic.
Yeah, I
was
would
like,
too.
Fuck, what
Like
do I
that's
roll?
ridiculous. And I think again, like that's something moving forward that me and Adam have talked about things like we want to make sure that everyone from the cast to like the audience understands what a roll is, because that's like where this stuff is fun to watch, right? Everyone understands that when you roll a d20, a 20 is really good and a 1 is really fucking bad. Like that's kind of, you just know that because it's referenced so much in like pop culture. But in here, like there's nothing, there's no equivalent of that, especially with how the syntax works in Roll20, where you don't even see the fact that you're rolling 6 dice. You get a box with a number around it, or a number with a box around it.
Yeah,
It was really,
So go ahead, Kaitlyn.
it was really hard for me to understand how to build my character because I had rifles 8, and then early on I realized, oh, that does nothing. Like, I put all these skill points into this thing, and then I got like a good gun, and I smart linked my gun, and it was still like not hitting anyone.
Yeah.
And so then I just got used to it. Like, okay, well, everything with guns.
I have a lot of like skills, I think they would be, that I never once used. I don't think I ever used negotiation. No, at the very end I gave you an extra dice while you yelled at the Germans.
Yeah. That was great. So, yeah,
I had biology. I had sewing.
Oh yeah, I had a bunch of skills too. Yeah.
I mean, the thing too is that we were playing a game that was like kind of overlapping with Shadowrun in some places, and like grudgingly we would have to use that game to resolve certain conflicts, and sometimes it was fun. Like once we started to kind of figure out how the parameters of the character works, especially in the more extreme ends like hacking for bonbon or magic for breakdown, that kind of thing. But really, you would have been served better by a character sheet that had your like looking cool skill and your like flirting skill.
Yeah.
Like there were things happening that the characters were doing that weren't mechanized, and that can cause a situation where you're running into a disconnect with the rules.
Right.
But I think thankfully we're all pretty adaptive, and just playing for karma was kind of enough rules to keep things moving.
For sure.
I played Earthdawn before, and so I was already kind of accustomed to having absolutely no idea what's going on, but still somehow playing. So I had that going for me.
Yeah, Earthdawn was a little intense in the same way. Yeah, totally.
I did not want to play that in real life.
Well, and that's sort of the thing about like Shadowrun, and we talked about this very early on. I think whether we were talking about it during character creation or whatever, you have a system where the rules and the setting are so tightly knit together that if you want to play with the setting, unless you want to write a whole new game that separates those out. Like I think now, 32 weeks on, I could write a Mirrorshades role-playing game that wouldn't be Shadowrun, that would feel like playing Mirrorshades. And if you wanted to, you could like trap on some Shadowrun stuff to it.
Yeah, like the fighting and stuff.
Yeah, but Shadowrun gives you tools for just doing combat, basically. Combat and a couple of other very minor things. And that to me was like a very small part of the game experience that we had. So like you were saying before, for people watching this who are like, oh, Shadowrun looks super cool. I want to play an elf wizard and have a friend who's a decker and do cyborgs, and then cool, here's 100 pages of indecipherable combat bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not going to feel like this because we
Yeah.
did all the work.
And that was the other thing too, that I'm glad that like the relationships of characters became the main focus and not me getting a scope on my gun, because like I had the best gun I could get. My gun could not actually get better. There was nothing I could do to like get better loot, unless we got like a tank. And so from the very first episode, I was like, well, I don't know what the character improvement is from here. And when it became like a relationship based show, I was like, oh, okay, this is what this is. This makes more sense.
Yeah, and it's like the reward cycle in Shadowrun burns out so fast if you play it by the book, because it's like you start and you maximize your capacity as a character, you hit your cap for your skills really quickly. You're literally just the best wizard you can be with the best gear, you have the best guns, the best cyberware. So you just make a bunch of money and you're like, well, what do I do now? I guess I just go on another Shadowrun. And it can get very grindy very quick, and it can feel a lot more like Dungeons and Dragons, but with office buildings instead of dungeons. And I think that focusing on the things that the rules didn't necessarily cover gave us a lot of sort of leeway to make this show what we wanted it to be.
I'd be interested to see what people who were huge Shadowrun fans and not necessarily roleplay fans that watch the show because of Shadowrun, and if anyone's still watching that like on YouTube or in the chat, like if you guys stuck around because it was like not actually Shadowrun, or just how you feel on that.
There were some salty people in the Hadia arc who were like, "This isn't Shadowrun. You're ruining it. This is my favorite game, and I hate it. I'm out." But I think we developed.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a comment I got a lot where they're like, "Why are they still playing Shadowrun? You're bad at it." But there were definitely people who came around on that too, who were like, "Oh, it's not the Shadowrun I expect, but I like the setting." And I think, like you said before, everybody who sees the Shadowrun setting is like, this is gonzo and ridiculous and kind of fun. So I want to stick around for that stuff. And if you can separate yourself from it being the good Shadowrunners, then I think that's what really makes the show fun, right? Because it's roleplay Mirrorshades,
right?
Roleplay Shadowrun.
Yeah, it's true. Also, we who was that? Adam, did you come up with the name?
Yes.
I think I remember you coming up with the name.
Best
good
name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I did a Google search for it the other day because I was looking for an old episode. I got the name from a now long out of print like mid 80s cyberpunk short story collection. And I Googled it, and it's not the first result anymore. It's somewhere further down the page now. There's all these like YouTube links and fan art in the wiki and stuff.
Oh,
like,
that's so awesome.
Take that, SEO.
That's right. SEO for days. But I think a name really goes to establish, and it's hard because we name these shows before we start playing them. But with Mirrorshades, I would definitely still call it Mirrorshades. Like it feels right for the show, you know. Yeah.
I still don't think the logo was ever perfect though.
But you don't think
from a production, it's as close as it was gonna get.
I like it.
Yeah.
I was looking at that when we were about to start the show. I'm like, who the fuck would wear that visor? Like, that looks like a terrible fucking...
Ooh, people from the cybernetic 90s that need awesome purple goggles.
I guess. I do like the fact that it was pink, though.
I think the skyline and the colors are perfect.
Yeah.
I do
they did a good job with that, for sure. Any more questions, Adam, that you want to hit on from the thread?
I think a lot of them were just questions about, like, what is going to happen of this? Like, is Breakdown going to reject Raven and turn back to Dove? Or, like, are Bonbon and Breakdown going to stay together? Or,
Whatever happened to the Will Shaman?
Yeah, so, I think that those were all pretty much covered in the questions. But I don't know, like, do any of you have questions for each other or for me or anything you want to talk about the show or about Shadowrun?
Not really. Not for me. I don't know about the rest of you.
Were there any times where you actually thought we were going to die or someone was going to die?
When we cut off for the before last week, I thought we were all dead.
Yeah, JP messaged me saying that we were for sure probably all going to die.
Well.
And he was like, well, this is the end. But he flat out said that.
Yeah.
It's funny because it is like I abandoned the idea of going the murder route very early on because, like, Crusher, you would have been easy to kill.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right.
I mean, I almost died multiple
Yeah,
times.
and I waited until the end. Like, I could have thrown neurotoxin, whatever, at you early on, but it wouldn't have been fun to, like, kill you. Like, the threat of danger was never about, am I going to lose my character? It was
Right.
about, how is the situation going to feel, like, weird and fucked up for me after? Like, how will my character change? Because change
Yeah.
is more fun than losing your character.
If anything, that's maybe. Sorry, are you finish
No,
your
go
thought? The one thing that I didn't like about this is that I think is for the whole, maybe wheat wasn't a factor, or wasn't the case for wheat, but for myself, like, it was the type of game where I didn't know what existed in this world that could actually give me harm, so I didn't know what to prepare for.
Yeah.
And that was something that was like really frustrating when like that would happen. And I'd be like, well, I didn't know that was a thing. Like and I don't know how I could know that was a thing. So I guess I'll just adapt and we'll see what happens.
In that sense, I always thought I was gonna die because I was like, well, this could be super bad for me. Like,
Yeah.
Or like if you made the mistake of glancing over at chat and everybody would be like, oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
because
you
they
could
know
tell
what
it was
it
a
is.
reference to something, and you'd suddenly panic and be like, fuck, is it a reference to a bad thing? Like, is a bad thing about to happen? Should I not talk to those people? Like, oh no.
I sort of love that, because I know more about the lore of Shadowrun than most
Right.
of you, with the exception of maybe we. So I could, like, put in just the tiniest hints about stuff to get people who are fans of
Yeah,
Shadowrun all
riled up.
riled up, right? I could just be like,
Yeah.
so they work for As Technology, and then chat would be like, and you're all like, what?
Yeah, like
Problem.
it was definitely like the Dark Heresy effect where I had no idea what the fuck was going on. And we could probably attest to that too. We had no idea what the fuck's going on in that universe at any moment. And then you have like Total Biscuit and Jeff who are just like fucking over there like 5-year-olds just freaking out anytime something's mentioned in the lore. And I was like, well, I guess that's cool. I mean, people are into it, sure. So that was like the one thing I guess I wasn't a fan of. But apart from that, it was
that's
good.
a gamble. That's a gamble with any, like, I would say that within the same, like, within the role playing kind of audience, there are people who are as big fans of Shadowrun who would be watching for that stuff in the same way that we're going to see with the Star Wars stuff that we're going to do. Like, people who are waiting for that kind of stuff, who are like, oh, they're going to this planet. I know about this planet. What if this is going to happen? And so as a GM, you really have to stay on top of that stuff. But for me, it was almost more fun that you as players didn't really know, because I could drop not that subtle hints and they'd bypass you. And I wouldn't have to worry about you being like, oh, cool, now I know it's this kind of thing, so I'm going to go and look into that. And
That's going to be hilarious when like we get some fucking crazy Star Wars nerd who like knows how many citizens are on a planet. And if you fuck it up, they're going to be like, this is not canonical. Like, it's not actually a thing.
if George Lucas can change what a parsec is, so can I.
There you go.
GM power.
I actually really enjoy not having that information because
Yeah.
I'm like really anti-metagaming, and it made it feel a lot more real and a lot more dangerous. And I
That
would
makes
not
sense.
have gotten that feeling otherwise. And that's something that you can really only get so many times in a certain system, and then it's gone.
That's true. I was definitely a little pissed off when Gavin's like, yeah, I have this mask. And I'm like, are you fucking, like, really?
At that
You
one,
fucking
I was
kidding
like,
me?
wouldn't my character have
The
known
goddamn
that's
mask? Like,
important?
those are not expensive if I just had a fucking mask.
He's just
We
better
don't have
prepared
rope
than you.
either. Why don't we have rope? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Shout out time. Are we good? Anything else?
I think so.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's do some shout outs. We'll do it in the typical order. Wheat, start us off.
Thank you guys, Kaitlyn, Dodger, Adam, JP. Mirrorshades was phenomenal. I loved every aspect of it. I loved the NPCs from it. I will never forget it. And I don't really want to say anything other than a heartfelt thank you to the players and the GM who made this experience fantastic. However, there is one other group of people that I would obviously like to recognize, and that is the fans who did amazing fan art, songs, pictures, like canon extensions, and I love it. This is much your guys' show as it is our show, and I think that really shows from sort of everything that's ever been produced. So thank you guys so much. I love Mirrorshades, and thank you for the experience.
There you go. Kaitlyn, do some shout outs.
like I said last week, this was completely unforgettable. So yeah, thanks again. Also, Wheat, Brooke, Adam, JP, love you guys, love the community. The cosplay too, like talking about
man.
crazy. There was this one fan art. Well, I always think of that fan art that Adam received in real life with Hadia and the jelly beans, and I forget how Adam described it, but it's like taking the character to a next level. And just so many people did that. You know, they weren't just drawing what they thought Night Sass looked like. Like, they drew like group interactions. They drew things that I hadn't even picked up on. The music was amazing. I didn't comment on it, but there were some new tracks released that are super sick. Like, I'm gonna add them into my playlist now, you know? So yeah, thanks. Thanks everyone so much. And thanks JP for making this all happen.
Awesome stuff.
Oh,
That's
and I'm
good.
also going to play more Metal Gear Solid tonight, I guess. So I'll throw that in.
There you go.
Shouting out.
Throw it out
part of
there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Dodger, do some shout outs.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, fuck, that's still from last week. You're good.
It's like Steven!
Nobody wants to be Steven.
No! All right, guys. Oh my gosh. I absolutely loved Mirrorshades. It was my first, like, Shadowrun experience. And I loved it. Like, how Wheat was saying that what he really fell in love with when he first played was the world. Like, I totally get that. Like, I want to read the books. I want to, like, learn as much as I can about Shadowrun. It just wound up being such a cool world to dive into and exist in and make characters in. And I just absolutely loved it. So, yeah, thank you, JP, for putting on the show and having me on it. I absolutely loved it. Kaitlyn, you're fantastic. I'm so glad we got to be on a show together. Wheat, thank you for being the mother of my children.
Of course.
You were great.
Anytime.
And Adam, you were such a great DM. I'm so glad that I got to be on a show with you, and I hope that I hope it's not the last. So, thanks everybody. Thank you so much to the community. You guys were great.
There you go. Last but not least, Adam, some shout outs.
Big shout out to our corporate sponsor, the NERPS Corporation. I'd like to thank them for their continued support. Ares Macro Technology, Fuji Technologies, thank you so much. No, I knew from the beginning that playing Shadowrun was going to be a weird experience, but I had no idea how weird. And it's been just the right kind. So I'm really glad that everybody jumped on board for the Mirrorshades game and was in it to win it. I've very rarely played with so flexible a group of people before, and so I think that a lot of the success of this series is attributed to our ability to just roll with whatever each other came up with. It's been a delight. So thank you everybody for coming and for playing with me.
There you go. All right, that's it. Dodger, Adam, you said you had one more thing to do.
Yeah, so I mean, in the traditional fashion, as the credits roll, they come to the end. The filmed on Panavision. This story is not actually real. Produced by Eastman Photography. Like that, as that goes away,
No
we
animals
get
were harmed.
Yeah, no, exactly. No elves were harmed in the filming of the series. We get the copyright MXM whatever that fades out, and we fade up on a convenience store, on a stuffer shack, and we pan across the aisles of junk food, and we see Breakdown. And Breakdown, you're here, maybe after a shift, looking kind of haggard, and
Thanks,
you're looking.
Soy Calf.
Yeah, exactly. Like soy calf in your hand, like looking at a Twinkie, thinking about should I eat this Twinkie or maybe no. And you're walking back towards the cashier, and you come around the corner, and standing at the cashier, we see the back of this individual. He's got long black hair in a braid. He's wearing a denim vest, and painted on the back of the vest is like an orca leaping out of the water majestically. And I think so. You walk up, we hear your shoes on the thing, and he finishes paying, and he turns. And for a moment, you like look into the eyes of the whale shaman, and he looks at you and says, "What's up?"
Oh, hey.
Takes his change off the counter, walks through the sliding doors. You walk up to the counter, and we fade out.
There you go. Post credits.
There you go.
That'll do it for RollPlay Mirrorshades. Thanks everyone so much for watching. This is the end. So we'll see you guys on another show. Appreciate all the
Bye,
support.
everybody.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.
Bye.